Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Idea Gen Global Podcast with George Sifakis.
I'm George Sifakis. In a world overflowing with noise, there is one forum where the world's smartest voices connect, where visionaries sit at the same table as innovators, and great minds don't just talk, they act.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi. Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC Minicast.
Welcome back, folks. We are the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you're staying warm. I hope you got your shovels ready because snow is coming throughout the southeast and the northeast, and we could get as much as 12 to 18 inches tonight. So I hope you are ready for Snowmageddon. Although sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they predict these huge snowstorms and they don't come in. I was just talking to Senator Hagerty in Tennessee. He's saying they've already gotten a lot of snow, and it looks like that storm is coming our way. So be ready for it and make sure you're prepared. You got food in the pantry, et cetera, because we could be a couple of days of digging out. My next guest, and by the way, at the end, in the final minutes of this hour, we will be taking some of your calls. I want to ask you about what you think about what Bill Hagerty was talking about this budget situation. Do you want to see another government shutdown? Are you disgusted with what Congress is doing? Are you disgusted with the amount of debt and deficits we're running? I am. The good news that these deficits are coming down, but there's no better financial expert to talk to and finance expert than my good friend David Bahnsen. You all know David. He's been on my show many, many times on More Money, but he also, you know him from Fox News. You know him from National Review. You know him because of his excellent books. Two of the ones that I like the most are Full Time, which it's called Full Time, Work and the Meaning of Life. And I think I love that book. And the other one, of course, is There's No Free Lunch, which is one of my favorites because it just has all these little pearls of wisdom. So, David, thanks so much for joining.
Well, Steve, good to be back with you.
So a lot I have to talk to you today about, David, starting with what did you think of Trump in Davos? I liked his speech a lot. It was a little bit triumphalist. He took a couple of victory laps, but my goodness, the U.S. economy is booming right now, according to almost every statistic. What did you think of Trump's performance in Davos?
Well, I thought that there were certain things said in his speech that were long overdue to Europe, about Europe, and it kind of made it harder for me because the things I wish he hadn't said, I think, took away from that. And so, this is how I am all the time about things with the president is there's just the stuff I love and then there's the stuff I don't love, and they're all got to take all of it together.
Right. Okay. So let's start with what you like. Let's get to both of those. Let's start with what you liked and then we'll get into what you didn't like. So what were some of the highlights?
Well, I think that the notion that Europe has not invested in a culture of growth, that Europe has let itself fall behind. I don't think the president necessarily fully expressed this, but you and I would express that a lot of that is its growing move towards secularism, towards statism, towards a democratic socialism that has really left it a very moribund and unimpressive economic contributor for decades. And I think the president is perfectly right to call that out.
By the way, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? And, this is a statistic I use all the time now, but it really underscores what you were just saying, David, which is, one of our poorest states in the country today is Arkansas, and Arkansas, the average resident of Arkansas now has a higher income than the average resident of Germany, which is just amazing. Germany has fallen so dramatically in the last decade.
Well, and there's these other stats too. I'm sure you've seen about the number of, top performing technology companies over the last 50 years that have come from Europe, like out of the top 50 in the world, I think 2 of them have been European or something. And so they just have not been competitive. And that's because of mistakes that they walked into culturally and economically.
Yep. And so how about what else did you like? I mean, one thing I liked was when he talked about how, about the Phillips. He didn't say the Phillips curve, but this Phillips curve idea is, prominent in economics that, if you have too much growth, you're going to get too much inflation. And I liked the fact that Trump said, wait a minute, growth doesn't cause inflation. If you have growth, you increase the supply of goods and services. And if you increase the supply of goods and services, the prices go down, not up. But there were little pearls of wisdom in that speech like that.
Well, that's right. He didn't exactly call it out that way, but that's the implication. And I do think that anything that is tearing down the orthodoxies of the academy for the last 50 years that imply growth is inherently inflationary needs to be done. Now, that needs to be done in America, too. And I would argue that sometimes it needs to be done even within certain policies that the president proposes. But he called that out well. And Europe, of course, has been littered with that for a long time. And so the Phillips curve needs to be left on the ash heap of history where I thought the 1970s left it.
Should have been. Okay, so tell me about, what is your position on Greenland and some of the things that maybe that Trump said that made you uncomfortable?
Yeah, I just look at a high level. I don't agree with any form of threats to imply that we are going to take Greenland. He did say we won't do it by force. That was a little different than certain things he implied before. He had said over the weekend, we're going to put tariffs on countries that even don't like us doing this. And so then what happens, Steve, is that you get a lot of the president's supporters that will say, I'm misunderstanding it, that it's all art of the deal negotiation stuff. And I no longer accept that default line on everything. I think that I am just old fashioned. I think what we say and how we say it matters. We have a strategic interest there. And I think that there were parts of his speech I really liked where he made the case for whether it's mineral rights, whether it's Golden Dome, whether it's hemispheric security. But I want to see that conversation. That's a serious conversation, and it should be done seriously. And so that's where I've just been a little bothered by some of the tactics.
So where are you now, David Bahnsen, on the U.S. economy? I mentioned the fact that the growth numbers that have been coming in the last few weeks have been really, really positive. The inflation numbers are not quite where we want them to be yet, David, but they have been coming down. So are you bullish now? Are you generally feeling good about the U.S. economy? I know you're not a tariff guy. I'm not a tariff guy. I do buy into some of Trump's arguments that he's used these tariffs as a bargaining chip, which, for the most part has been pretty good. But I think he's going to lose in the Supreme Court, by the way, David, and that may require Trump to return a lot of this revenue. I know there's a lot there, but what's the current state of affairs?
Well, I have a really big theme this year that it's very agnostic about where the economy may go, which is totally different than saying things are very bad, the labor market's falling apart, the tariffs are going to lead to everything tanking. It is not a bearish view, but I will confess that I don't quite see the data as assuredly optimistic as maybe you or our friend Larry Kudlow do.
Right.
First of all, the last quarter GDP is certainly true that, the annualized number got way up there. But then when you apply it to the whole year, we're going to end up at maybe 2%, 2.1% real GDP growth, which is much less than you had the year before. And so the reality is that I want to see it trending in the right direction. And I think that there's stuff in the Big Beautiful Bill Act that is supply side and pro-growth. And I know the CBO scored it at $130 billion of additional business investment, which is stimulus. Okay, it's a good thing. I think it's $200 billion. I think they're underestimating it. And I believe that when you tax less of business investment, you get more business investment. So that is the bullish side I'm making, is that is a $200 billion annual increase to the economy. But my problem is, Steve, it comes with a $300 billion cost to the corporate economy in the form of tariffs. And I don't have the arrogance to say that I know how that will play out. It's a push-pull between two things. And so, the inflation rate at the end of the year was the same as it was the last few months of 2024. The GDP was less than it was. That doesn't mean we're not going to trend better. But unfortunately, I think back to the first term, and I know that I'm talking to someone who was a big part of this stuff in the first term. What you and Art and Larry and a lot of the people that were there in Trump 1.0 were doing, look, you get a bigger benefit when you drop the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%.
Yes,
that's huge. Low-hanging fruit, and it moved the needle a lot. But we don't have anything like that this time. And so I'm just having a hard time getting as optimistic, but I'm not pessimistic. I'm agnostic.
Right. Okay. So you raise a good point. There's no question. You and I completely agree that the low hanging fruit when Trump came in, which is amazing. We didn't do this long before Trump came in, was, we had essentially the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And we brought it down to about the average. And that had a huge impact in bringing investment to the United States. What would you say is the low hanging fruit now? In other words, if Donald Trump called you and said, hey, I need your advice, what do we do? What are the 2 or 3 things you would recommend Trump do, to continue to, see the records to help the stock market, to help the economy, to help workers?
Number one, I would announce that any tariff that has been implemented, which is not out of protecting critical infrastructure and national security, is being repealed. He did it in the fourth quarter when he saw that coffee and bananas and sugar, produce items, so he knows, he's pragmatic. He's smart. You know that. He knew it wasn't working and he undid it. But look, the steel and aluminum and lumber, it's hurting housing.
Yeah, it did.
And so those things I would want to see repealed. And then you say, what can you do? I would pass a deal that says no law gets passed without 2 laws going away. Like put some meat on the bone around deregulation, because he's done it with energy and he's done it with finance, and it's been lovely. Let's do it with everything. Let's do it not just in banking and energy. Let's do it across the whole economy.
And then give me one more.
Then I'm sorry to paraphrase you, but I'll tell you, as my favorite Wall Street Journal op-ed I've read in a long time, I would absolutely index in capital gains to inflation, and not just for primary residence. I would do it for stocks. I would do it for businesses. I'd do it for any asset sold at a gain where you pay capital gain tax. Index the darn gain to inflation, so people are only paying taxes on real gains, not nominal gains.
Well, I love that third one. And by the way, we debated back and forth about whether we should recommend we do it for everything or for housing. Of course, you and I agree that it would be, look, it's just not only is it bad economics, but it's not fair to tax people on inflationary gains. And so thank you for mentioning that. So now we are, David Bahnsen, with record highs in the NASDAQ, in the S&P 500, and in the Dow. We're knocking on the door of Dow 50,000. We've lived through the greatest 40-year bull market in the history of the world. Can it continue?
Well, it sure can. I mean, the reason that stocks always can continue is that they've gone up through really good presidents and they've gone up through really bad presidents, because it's the one thing that gets to be a little more removed from the interventionist hand of government is, corporate profit making, wage growth, innovation. The stuff that creates prosperity is in the private sector, and the stock market's largely capturing that. The big bullish argument, even though the S&P is very expensive at 22 or 23 times earnings, is that it's rare in history, Steve, to have double-digit profit growth. And let's say we do get decent economic growth this year, and the Fed is reducing rates. All of those things put together are supposed to be a good backdrop for stocks. The problem has been that the Mag 7, the AI, the tech stuff has become such a huge overweight, and I'm quite convinced those things are going to underperform this year, that it may lead to a good year in stocks, but not as good a year for the S&P 500, for the broad index. And we're seeing a lot of it already, not a correction, a rotation, where energy is doing better.
sorry to interrupt you. We have to take, could I hold you over for one more segment? This is a fascinating conversation. If I could abuse your time for about 10 more minutes, what I'd like to ask you about is, you've done so much, work on the value and virtue of work. There's some new statistics that are somewhat, troubling on that. So, could you hold over?
Yeah, I'll stay with you. You got it.
Okay. So folks, this is the More Money Show. That's David Bahnsen, one of the top financial experts in the country, and we will be right back. We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for joining on a Saturday afternoon. We're live and in color. And so thank you for, by the way, almost every other station has boring infomercials and so on. On WABC, we give you live programming all the way. It's a pretty amazing thing. 3 hours of Larry Kudlow from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and then you get the More Money Show from 1 to 3. That's quite a lineup. So I've been talking to David Bahnsen, who is really one of the best financial advisors out there in terms of telling us what's happening with the market, what's happening with the economy. You see him all the time on Fox Business News, Fox News. You read him all the time at National Review. And what is the name of your company, David? David?
Oh, the Bahnsen Group, and people can find everything, including the investment writing and market commentary, at dividendcafe.com. Dividendcafe.com.
So that's a great site to go to. You wrote a book about the just looking this up right now because I had it in front of me, and then your book about work. What's it called again? What's the title?
Full-time work and the meaning of life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I love that book, and I love it because I agree with almost everything in it. And I'm very concerned, David. I don't know if you've seen some of these latest statistics about the Gen Zs, but one of the statistics is that for males between the ages of about 18 and 30, the male participation rate in the labor force has declined, which I find troubling. I think you probably do too. And then a second one that's related to this is that there was just recently a poll done of Gen Z folks, but I think the age of the respondents was 20 to 30 years old or so, and they were saying that a common attitude among these young people was, it doesn't really matter how hard you work, because you just can't get ahead and the system's rigged against you and that kind of thing, which I think is a very subversive idea of how the American economy works. Those two things you write a lot about in your book, and I wonder just what do you have to say about both of those things?
Well, I mean, look, it's unfortunately not just 18 to 30, but even into 30s and 40s, there is a decline for males in the labor participation, and it's become a cultural phenomenon for some time. And it bothers me a great deal. And people think, because you and I are economists, that's the way we're talking here. I'm bothered on a human level. I mean, that's the point I want the book to communicate, that there's an incredible amount of dignity, of satisfaction in life that comes from productivity and active, useful endeavor. And that's what our work ought to be. And then seeing people deprived of that bothers me a great deal. And seeing them deprive themselves of it bothers me even more. This narrative, though, that people are being deprived of the ability to have a good life, I think you have to kind of tackle it from both sides. I am a huge critic of what has happened about housing affordability. I think there's a combination of policy errors that have really contributed to the astronomical entry level of houses, and it bothers me a great deal. I also believe that we have more 25 and 30 and 35-year-olds that are making a great living and finding a rewarding career than we've ever had. And so I don't like anything that is presented fatalistically. I want policy to get right so that the greatest amount of people can find human flourishing. But I also don't want anybody to give up, because sometimes to make it, you have to overcome bad policy.
So your book on work is full-time is really important because you said it very well. There is dignity in work. People who work are happier than people who don't work, as you know. I mean, you show this in your book. So it's not just an economic issue. It's for your mental health that everybody needs to feel like they have a reason to be and are productive and contributors.
Yes, and as a man of faith, I not only believe that, but I believe it because I actually do think that's the way God made the world. I think that we were made to work and be productive, and that most stimulates the things about us that make us human. That we're not just passive creatures. We have agency. Mm-hmm. We have active things we can do to contribute and create and innovate and everyone is going to do that a different way to their own taste and abilities and skills and interests. And so I like the fact that in a market economy, people have a very big menu they can order from in terms of what they want to do with their lives. But I don't accept the Keynesian notion that we're all here just to consume and that the things that bring us happiness in our life are what we can go shop for. I think that we're fundamental. I'm a supply sider. I think that we find happiness when we build the supply side of the economy by producing goods and services that meet the needs of humanity. And sometimes our dreams can come true from that. And sometimes we can engage in really meaningful relationships with people. But the point being, we're contributing, we're taking agency, and that's the key here.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, David Bahnsen, is obviously the robotics AI age is upon us. I think it's coming a lot faster and in a lot in a change mode that I think a lot of Americans may not be entirely prepared for. I've told my listeners, and I've told you this, David, that I'm on the board of a company called Lightspeed, and we build houses with robots. And you're seeing in California now many of the Uber and Lyft cars are now automated cars, so you don't have people driving them. The cars drive themselves. We're probably not going to have many trucking drivers left 10 years from now, et cetera. So this is going to be one of the most dramatic productivity improvements in history, but people do worry about, well, what will we do? What will workers do if robots are doing all this work for us? So what is your response to all of that?
Yeah, Steve, I mentioned dividendcafe.com a moment ago, and a few months ago, I wrote a very exhaustive piece on this because I have really strong opinions. I do think that whether it's AI or robotics or various elements of digital technology, there not only will be, but there already has been a fair amount of things that, have been able to replace and make more efficient some of these particular positions. I'm not totally sure truck drivers are going to be entirely obsolete because of pointed delivery and what happens when you actually get to Fifth Avenue in Midtown traffic, But yeah, trucks going across the 10 freeway, from coast to coast, there's a lot of changes coming. But then I think to the fact that the digital revolution started over 50 years ago and we created 58 million net new jobs. And we don't have typewriter salesmen anymore. And we do, the services economy really did pass the goods economy in a lot of ways. And that's what the American worker wanted. They wanted a higher quality of life, and it was less physically laborious and more profitable and more consistent. The Industrial Revolution is very telling as well. That we moved from an agricultural economy to a more industrial economy, and we created 20 million net new jobs with a lot less population base then than we have now. So there's going to be people, Steve, that it hurts. There's going to be people that have to retrain, and that's where guys like you and I think, have an important moral duty because we don't ever stop praising the free enterprise system. Well, if you want to have more options for workers that get displaced by AI, you better be an advocate of a market economy, because that's what creates the dynamism and the mobility for people to be able to find something different when there are periods of transformation.
Well put. Well, David, I'll pay you overtime because I promised you I'd have you on for 10, and you educated us for about 20 minutes. So thank you so much. I'll buy the next drink when we get together. But that's David Bahnsen, one of the world's sort of experts on finance and the economy and the stock market. Appreciate you coming on, David. This has been a fun 2 hours, getting ready for the big snowstorm coming in, folks. Bundle up, make sure you're prepared, get the shovels ready, get the salt ready. And by the way, this is a time when a lot of accidents happen. People, have back problems because they go out and try to shovel the heavy snow, and the emergency rooms are filled with people who have heart attacks or back spasms and so on. So be careful out there. But it's going to be a winter wonderland. It's going to be beautiful out there after the snow comes down. So it looks like most of Washington and New York will be shut down on Monday if the snow comes in as expected. But meanwhile, we have WABC to listen to, and it never shuts down. So appreciate so much you all joining. We'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel next week. Stay warm, stay safe. God love America, and I'll talk to you next week. This has been the More Money Show.
Busted. The reviews are in. Awesome. You wanted more Joe Concha. And we heard you. More Joe. More show. We're talking to you.
Under promise and over deliver.
Joe Concha. Weeknights at 9. Plus Sunday mornings at 11 on 77 WABC.
Jimmy Kimmel no longer tries to be funny. Not that he ever really was.
Joe Concha. Weeknights at 9. Plus Sunday mornings at 11.
Democrats defending cocaine coming into the country.